Today we're taking a deep dive into one of the most influential and controversial figures in modern economic history, John Maynard Keynes. Hey everyone, welcome back to Bare Economics, where I strip down economics to what matters. You've probably heard of Keynesian economics, but you might not have heard much about the man behind the theory, or the long shadow that he's cast over the financial world. Spoiler alert, it's not all pretty. All right, let's get into it. So who was Keynes? John Maynard Keynes was born in 1883 in England and quickly rose through the ranks of British academia. He studied at Eton and Cambridge, rubbed shoulders with elites, and was a founding member of the so-called Bloomsbury Group. It was a circle of artists, writers, intellectuals, known for pushing moral and social boundaries. A bunch of hippies before hippies were around. Among his close friends were figures like Leighton Strachey and Virginia Woolf. And the group openly rejected Victorian values, embracing sexual liberation, including homosexuality, and according to some historians, a disturbingly casual attitude towards relationships with minors. While direct evidence is limited, Keynes kept detailed diaries referencing encounters that would be highly questionable at best, even criminal by today's standards. But it wasn't his personal life that was controversial, even though we can definitely dive more into that, but we're going to stick with the economics. But putting aside his personal life that was very controversial, it was his economic ideas that would go on to reshape the entire global financial system, for better or worse. Keynes became famous for his 1936 book, The General Theory of Employment, Interest, and Money. In it, he argued that markets don't always self-correct, and that during economic downturns, governments should intervene, not by cutting back, but by spending more, even if it meant going into debt. He believed that consumer demand was the engine of the economy. So if people weren't spending, the government should do it for them by borrowing, printing, and pushing money into the system. And here's the kicker. He actually encouraged deficit spending, saying, in the long run, we're all dead. That quote became pretty much the motto for decades of economic irresponsibility that followed. It was a really seductive idea that governments could just paper over problems with more money and more debt instead of making hard choices. The damage done. Keynesianism wasn't just a theory, it became political. In the post-World War II world, governments everywhere adopted this model. Central banks manipulated interest rates, politicians pushed stimulus after stimulus, and soon national debts exploded. This shift created the debt-based world that we live in today, where governments borrow endlessly, inflate away purchasing power, and call it economic growth, where central banks distort interest rates to fuel asset bubbles, and where inflation, not productivity, becomes the primary driver of GDP. It's no coincidence that after abandoning the gold standard and embracing fiat money, the US debt has shot past $34 trillion, and inflation became a permanent feature of economic life. Austrian economists like Ludwig von Mises and Friedrich Hayek warned us. They said printing and borrowing might bring short-term relief, but it would ultimately lead to malinvestment, boom and bust cycles, and eventually collapse. And unfortunately, they were right. Legacy of control and moral hazard. Keynesian thinking gave rise to powerful institutions like the IMF and the World Bank, which now loan money to countries in crisis, but always with strings attached. It also gave governments and central banks justification to micromanage economies, creating a system where free markets are rarely truly free. Keynes made it intellectually respectable to say, let the government fix it. But the mindset discourages savings, personal responsibility, and long-term planning. It fuels short-termism and punishes fiscal discipline. Worst of all, it creates moral hazard, the belief that someone else, usually the taxpayer, will clean up the mess. All right, final thoughts. John Maynard Keynes was brilliant, no doubt, but brilliance without wisdom is dangerous. His ideas might have been popular among politicians, but they've left everyday people holding the bag, paying for bailouts, watching their savings erode, and living under mountains of public debt. And when you look at his personal life, his elitist background, and his disregard for long-term consequences, it paints a very troubling picture. This isn't just about economics, it's about values. Keynes' legacy is one of a short-term gain at long-term cost. It's up to us to question that legacy and consider a better path, one grounded in responsibility, sound money, and freedom. If you learned anything in this video or made you think differently about Keynes and the system we live in, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and share with someone who still thinks the government can spend its way out of debt. Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next video.